Hello, it's William here, and I'm going to show you Wusik station ST8. This one replaces the Wusik Beats Q8, as I'm going to do a series of plugins with the name Wusik station ST. So ST8 is the first one, and I'm going to show quickly the first basic features. So this is the standalone version. So the difference is from the plugins version is that it has an options here on the top, which you can adjust audio and MIDI settings. And that's the only difference. The plugins version doesn't have that. You can also resize the plugin using the bottom right corner here to resize it, make it larger or smaller. You can click on the Wusik station name here on the top left. And there's a few options here, but you can also set the size. The original size is going to be using the original graphics, so it's not going to upscale or downscale anything. There's also the CRT type. There's a light version and a darker version, which is the one that I personally prefer. You can click on full screen here on the bottom, and you can now adjust the type of full screen by clicking on the Wusik station again and select full screen, normal, or reduce it. So those are the most important aspects for you to check out when you start. The global menu here on the Wusik station name. So I have the full screen option, the size, the CRT type. You can disable global effects and tooltips if you want. There's a help and a shortcuts area. So the help is F1, and you can check everything that the plugin does, the synth does. And F2 is going to show the shortcuts because it's really made for using the keyboard. It's much easier to edit things with the keyboard. And then there's also the random preset generator, which is F5. And let's say you create a random preset, then you create another one, but you prefer the previous one. You just press F4. It's not on the list here, but you press F4, and it's going to go back to the previous one. And if you press F4 again, it's going to go back to the new one. It's just going to cycle the previous and the new one that you just created with the F5 preset random generator. Okay, so as an interface, now this is going to take a while, but let's start with the basics. We have here the name of the product, the Wusik station ST8. You have these 3 lines icon here, which tells that there's a menu option there. So if you click, it's going to open the menu option. So this goes for everywhere that you see these 3 lines. It's going to open a menu. You have 3 areas. The Synth Area, which is the Synth Morph Sequencer. Synth Morph Sequencer, sorry. Then you have the sample player, and then the drum machine. So that's the 3 areas that you see here on the top. Next to it, you have the preset number and a next previous and next preset. So I can go clicking on the next one, and it's going to show the name. Or if I click on the number, it shows the list of presets and some bank options. So I can rename a bank, export, import. I can load initial bank, so it's going to be an empty one, or I can load the factory bank. Another thing is the 2 knobs here on the left right. They show on both the original CRT or the darker CRT. They allow you to adjust the brightness of the display, and also adjust the color of the elements. So if I go all the way up, it's going to be white. and I can adjust if I want to another color. I'm going to leave white for now as it's easier to see. I'm going to put my darker CRT type again and hit full screen. Now, this synth and sampler shares the amplitude envelope, the quality, the volume of the layer, the filter and filter envelope, and the effects. And you have 4 layers. You have layer A, B, C, and D. Each layer is its own set of everything you see on the screen, including the 3 areas. So you have four layers, and each layer you have a synth sequencer, a sample player, and a drum machine. Sorry about that. And each layer you have the key switching here on the K, so you can use key switching to turn layers on and off. And you also have the MIDI channel, so you can put different MIDI channels to each layer. Okay, the next step we're going to talk about is the synth sequencer, the synth morphing sequencer. It uses single cycle waveforms. It uses a 8-bit resolution, but just for the waveform. Everything else is 64 bits. So how does it work? You have 4 oscillators. You can see here on the bottom, oscillator 1, 2, 3, and 4. And you also have 4 samplers, sample players, sample 1, 2, 3, and 4. So they are tied together. So the oscillator 1 is tied to the sampler 1, oscillator 2 to the sampler 2, oscillator 3 to the sampler 3, and oscillator 4 to the sample 4. So that's how it works. And when I say tied, it's because it's going to use the same filter, amplitude, and the settings for the synth sequencer, but it's also going to use the sequencer options. So the volume, panning, tuning, fining, and filter is going to be using the same for the sampler. And the sampler uses a single file, so it's a single zone 8-bit file. You can browse the 254 samples that we have. I don't think I have the volume up. Now I have to load the initial patch to hear that. So I'm going to do that in a while. So you have the 4 oscillators tied up with the 4 samplers. And the drum machine is a total different story. It's separated from everything. So first let me talk a bit more about the synth and sampler. I'm going to load the initial patch. So we just have a oscillator 1 with 1 waveform. And you have banks A and B. Keep in mind that when you change a bank, it's going to change the bank for all the steps in the sequencer. If you right click, it's going to select one single cycle waveform and close the selector. If you middle click, it's going to select 64, the next 64 single cycle waveforms to the 64 steps on the sequencer. If you use the mouse wheel up and down, you can see the other steps. So you can see here steps 1, 2, 3, and 4. And you go up and down, you can see the other steps, 10, 11, 20. And here at the bottom, of oscillator 1, I can select the number of steps I want. Right click is going to allow you to fine adjust. So let's put 4 steps here. Then I can adjust the speed. And you can see that all the steps has morphing to the max. So if I remove the morphing. So you can see that the total number of steps in here, if I press N on my keyboard, is 128. But I haven't set it to use only 4 steps. You can see here on the right of the sequencer total steps is the loop. So the sequencer loop positioning, which is going to be where it goes after you finish the sequencer. I also have the option of sequencer type, for, run, or ping pong. I have the volume, the panning, and that's it for the oscillator. Then you have the options, which has some extra options like ring modulation, hard sync, and a 4 bits morphing instead of 8 bits morphing. Another things you can see here next to oscillator 1 is there's a 1O. It means it's one oscillator. If I click, it's going to be 2. Then 3. Then the super oscillator A, B, C, D, and X. You can move the mouse over to see what it means. So in this case, it's super oscillator 16 voices. Or if you press the right click, it's going to go backwards. So now it's 8 voices, and so on. So this adds more voices, and the tune is each voices in a random way. So it's very good for creating a more of a wide sound, because it adds more oscillators, the tunes then, and also pans then in a different way. So that's a super oscillator 16 voices. So those are the options for the synth morphing sequencer. And if I go to the sample player, if I reduce the volume of the steps, so let's put just 1 step now. 1 step. I'm going to put very low, but I can totally disable if I want. So now the oscillator 1, the sequenced steps are not playing because there is no volume on them. But the sample player can still function. So now if I go here on the sample player, I can click on the 3 lines here for the menu options. There it tells me that I can load a custom sample if I want. And just keep in mind that the sample is not going to be saved in a project. It's going to only save the location of the sample. So at a later point I'm going to add the option to save and embed the sample along the bank file, but for now it just saves the file location of the sample you import. Then you can force loop it, force one shot if you want. And the other options are pretty much like the oscillator, including the multi-sound or multi-oscillator within us, the same sound. Then we have the fine-tuning, volume, pitch. But if I go here now on a sequencer, if I, let's say, I put 4 steps again, and I put all them without volume, but I put different tunings. I'm using the right click to make a fine tuning, but I can also use the left and right on my keyboard to adjust that, and up and down on the keyboard. So you get the idea. That's why I say it's tied with the oscillator 1, because it's going to follow the steps on the sequence. And another thing on the steps, you can middle click on any of the values and it's going to set random values. So let's see, I'm going to go here on tuning and I'm going to middle click, it's going to show random 1, random 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 is the maximum. And if I want to disable, just move it up and down and it's going to disable the random. The number of the random 0 to 9, means random 0 is going to be a small number and random 9 is going to be a large number. And I can also do the same thing on the sample, on the single cycle waveform. If I put random 9, it's going to randomize the entire bank that has been selected. Let's put this very fast. That's too fast. Let me reduce the number of steps to 2. And I can also do this with the filter. So the filter, we have 2 filters, filter 1 and filter 2. And if you click on a filter, it's going to show if serial is selected and the filter type. So let's put this in parallel. So now serial is no longer selected. The filter frequency change can be slow or fast. I'm going to put this as fast. And the envelope, I'm going to put it to the second filter. And I'm going to select a bandpass filter. And resonance, I'm going to put it a bit higher. Now I'm going to select here on the steps, filter random 9. Let's put this low to see what happens. Oh, of course, because the second step, I put 2 steps, and the second step has filter 0. So let's put filter random 9 too. So it's randomizing the filter in the steps. And you also have an option to use the filter envelope looped. So let's remove this here on the filter. And use the filter envelope instead. So now the filter envelope is looped, and I can also use this for pitch. But nothing happens if I raise the pitch, because I have to enable on the oscillator that I want the pitch envelope now is enabled. So that's pretty much on this area. The amplitude envelope is just an attack decay sustainer and release envelope. For those that never use an attack ADSR, attack decay sustain release, it's very simple. You have the sustain, which is going to be the sustain level. Then you have the decay, which only works if the sustain is not at maximum, so it's like something lower than a maximum. So it's going to decay to that sustain level, and the attack is just going to be the attack on how the level raises up. And release is going to be the release level. There are several sites on the internet that you can check out for better explanation of the ADSR envelope. Then you have the chorus and the reverb, which have tooltips for each of the options. And the reverb has an inspection option, which if you move the step reverb all the way up, it's going to show hold. So it's going to hold the reverb effect until you release all keys. So there is a preset that I created that I showed this very well. Let's see if I remember the name. It's Hold My Beer, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, that's the one. As long as I keep the keys down, then I release the keys, is going to release the reverb. So what happens is that the first three steps sends the audio to the reverb, then it holds the audio and it loops in this empty step here. So there's nothing else going to go into the reverb anymore, and you just have the holding of the reverb sound going. So that's just a nice effect to have. So you have 4 oscillators. Each oscillator has its own 128 steps with single cycle waveforms that you can morph from one another. Then you have the sample player, which has 4 sample players, each tied to an oscillator. Then we have the drum machine. The drum machine is a completely different beast, and it runs in parallel with everything, but it uses the layer reverb. So let me load here a drum test. There is one somewhere. Drum test here. So this is the drum test. So if I play, so how the drum works? The drum has 64 patterns. Let me check it out. 64 patterns, and each pattern has 12 tracks, and each track can play 64 steps. So you can see here I'm showing 32 steps, and there is step, show first 32 steps here, and show last 32 steps. So I can use this S1 and S2 to show 32 steps at a time. So the first 32 and the last 32 for a total of 64 steps. Of course, you can use less. If I go here on the length, I can put less, let's say just 16 steps, so just going to be 16 steps. Or even less if I want. So I have my pattern number here, how many times it should loop, and what's going to be the next pattern to play after it finishes. So since here is pattern 1 and pattern 1 is never going to leave this pattern, unless I put pattern 2. So it finished pattern 1 and go to pattern 2, and now pattern 2 is set to next pattern 2, so it's not going to leave this pattern either. You can adjust the length. The spacer is there 2 types of spacing. You can adjust for an 8 style, a 4 style, or no spacing at all. Then you have the type of, it can be forward, run, or reversed. Forward, random, reverse, and ping pong. This is ping pong. And there are some options here also here next to pattern number with the 3 lines. So you can step if it's going to follow the host, or first note starts the pattern and only stops if you play stop. Or the best one that I like to use is on any note hold. So any note on the keyboard is going to start the pattern, and you can see here at the bottom mini notes to pattern. So base notes 48. I can click it and set other number. So I'm going to put 60. So my middle C on my keyboard, which is 60, is going to be the first pattern. And if I release the keyboard, it stops. And the next note is going to pattern 2, the next note pattern 3, the next pattern 4, and so on. So this is the easiest way to use. So you just create these notes on your sequencer, and there you go. Another thing here at the bottom, there are some keyboard shortcuts reminders. You can click on it to cycle several informations. And you can leave the one that you like best, or just leave it blank if you want. As always, you press F2 and F1. It can give you some help about the synth. Let's go back to drum. Here next to drum there is an asterisk that's steps mirror mode. When you activate it, it shows mirror. And any value I change is going to change on any of the other 16 steps. You can see here I'm changing with the mouse wheel 1 step, and it's changing the other 16 steps, and it's going to do this for all the 64 steps. So this is a great way to quickly dump a pattern. Then you disable the mirroring and just fine tuning for each of the 16 steps. Now clicking on the track name or the 3 lines is going to show the track options. You can click on a name to put a new name. You can change the volume, the panning, the reverb amount, the output, because you have 6 outputs. You can change the output of this track, and the tuning of the sound. You can also load a custom sound. Try me to remember how to load a custom sound. Oh, here on the bottom, custom. You can load a custom sound if you want, or select any sounds from the list. And you can see here on the bottom, right, left click, start, end, offset. So I can use the right click and the left click to select the start and end offsets of the sound. So I can select just one area, or I can use the slicer. And with the slicer, I can, using the right and left, add, change, slice buttons on the keyboard to adjust the slices that I want. So let me load an example of that. Drum slicer test. So this one already has some looped sounds loaded. So let me play this pattern. So how this works? I have three sliced loops here. You can see if I right click on a step, it shows me several extra options for a step, including the slice number. You can also see that there's a flam, output, tuning, panning, reverb. I can set a reverb for just one step. The probability of the steps to happen, so it's always, but I can put a different probability. Oh, that's a hard word to say. But all this can be done from the keyboard too, if you want. Just look here on the bottom. There's a key for each of the options. So let's see. Let's see what's the slice option. Slice 3 and control slice 1. 1, 2, 3, control 2, 1. So you can use the L. You can see here on the bottom, L is slice. So if I go here, it shows up there slice 3. And control always reduce the number of the letter that's on the bottom there. So L and control L reduces. The same goes for T. T is tuning, and control T reduces. So that's how you use the numbers and the letters here on the bottom. You can also right click and add anything manually if you want. Another thing, let me load an initial patch again, is the flam. So let's load a hi-hat here. Okay, I have my hi-hat here. Let's put 16 steps. So let's see. Now if I put F for the flam, it's going to cycle all the flam options that I have, or Ctrl F is going to go back. So let's say I put this type of flam here and this type of flam here. So that's a very great way to add more complex steps and sounds directly. And you also have options like random values, which is pretty much self-explanatory. Just the sample index could be a bit confusing, but the idea is that if I enable the sample index, so let me erase all these guys here. So let's put 9, and I'm going to put this 9 random sample index, and now I have to set a sample index. So let's say I'm going to put number 10. So it's going to take the selected sound and up to 10 next sounds is going to play. And I'm going to duplicate this step with D for duplicating. No, not for duplicating. How do I duplicate it? Control D, because D selects the layer D. So Control D is going to duplicate this step. So you can hear that it's playing a random sound, starting from the sound I selected up to 10 next sounds. So that's the sample index. Everything else is pretty much easy to understand. There's a delay option. You can delay a step by 1/128 time. And then you have some pattern options like copy, paste, and init. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So if I forgot something, just please leave a comment, and I'm going to reply there or create another video depending on what it is. But that's pretty much it for this synth. And you can check out the demonstration version and check out all the sounds that are there. That's it for this video, so thanks for watching.